Any publicity is good publicity. I'm interested to hear how you think about producing repeat content on games that have been released in a suboptimal state and often with suboptimal patches. Clearly, there is great interest in redemption stories a la Cyberpunk, as well as beating the occasional dead horse like Jedi Survivor. But I wonder if games that come out in a good/great state miss out on some choice DF exposure. Notionally, John. I'm going to go to the John. Discontinue the continuity in John's here. Surely this is basically, well, here's the thing, like every Monday we have a Monday morning content meeting, and it's very rare to the point where it basically doesn't happen that I tell people what to do. It's basically, what do you fancy doing? Because I trust you guys in distinguishing what are the good stories and what are the interesting stories that you want to tell. So yeah, it is a shame if we miss out on games that are in a good/great state, but ultimately the content choices are driven not so much by, okay, we want to go back and make an example out of Jedi Survivor again, but more to the fact of how people actually want to produce, what they want to produce, because I think that's ultimately going to produce the best content. But yeah, what do you think?
I mean, I'm honored if this is actually the Lil Jon, but although he seems to have added an H there, so perhaps not. No East Side boys in around us either. But so I mean, I get what he's saying, where he's like, yeah, if it's a game that has issues and then it keeps getting patched, there is a chance that more videos are going to be made than if if a game comes out and it's just really good and then we make one video on it and then don't touch it again, right? Because it was in perfect state. So there's some logic there, but like, whew, I mean, in most of these cases, I feel like that kind of coverage. I mean, not only do we not love doing it necessarily, but it's also just, it's not really good for the game, right? Like, our performance reports and stuff like Jedi Survivor can't possibly have been viewed as a positive thing for Jedi Survivor, right? Like it is a little bit more exposure, but it's still knocking the fact that even though it's a great game, it has serious technical problems, and many have not been fixed.
Yeah,
which is a shame.
I like to think that if there is a good game out there with a great technical story to tell, that we would be telling it anyway, and that would take priority over going back and looking over an older game. But ultimately, there is a great deal of interest in these games, and we often get a huge amount of requests from people on social media asking us to take a look. And I guess there's also the question of how much effort we put in. Sometimes if it's a big story, we will make a video about it. But if it's not, then we'll just include it in DF Direct Weekly, and we'd only do like a much smaller subset of tests to make the point. Oliver, what do you make of this?
I think it's a good idea if people are really interested in the games themselves. Like, I think that when we do repeat content, repeat coverage on games like Cyberpunk and The Witcher and Fallout 4... and Starfield, those are big titles that people seem to really be interested in, and when we do content on them, it seems to do well. And I mean, I personally enjoy it. I do a lot of these, and I mean, I don't know. I'm a little bit conflicted about it, because obviously it would be better if they weren't necessary and the games were released in a really good state to begin with. But also the redemption story is interesting. It can be very compelling, very interesting. And so, yeah, and I also think that, like, for the most part, we are covering pretty much everything that's like really interesting, new and upcoming that people are interested in. Like when we do repeat coverage, it's usually not at the expense of something else that would be really intriguing for our audience, generally speaking. So like, I'm happy to do repeat coverage on games, especially because people seem to be very invested in it. And a lot of games, these big titles, they just get updated and updated and updated every month. And they get improved in a way that I don't think we really saw as much of in prior generations. But now it's like a title like Cyberpunk will just be updated ad infinitum through, 4 years of patches at this point. It's kind of insane.
Yeah. I mean, we haven't covered every Cyberpunk patch. When a Cyberpunk patch comes out, typically we go to Tom and say, can you take a look at this and see if there's a story there? And if there isn't, well, then we don't do a video on it. Similarly, there's stuff like Lords of the Fallen 1.5, where, you know, they made a big song and dance about performance improvements, and lo and behold, there were performance improvements, but it wasn't especially something that was worth doing a video about. So we just verified the information. It went in DF Direct Weekly. But I actually think that if there's the story trumps all, right? If there's a story there, we should be covering it. And it kind of doesn't matter to me whether it's a new or an existing game, as long as it's interesting.